Regardless of how you personally feel about tipping, whether you're someone who leaves a minimum 20% tip no matter what, or someone who never leaves a tip at all, you have to acknowledge that tipping in the US is super weird, with a bunch of seemingly made-up rules. But have you ever wondered why we tip? Not why we should tip, but why we ever started tipping at all. The history of tipping is surprisingly dark. It's a legacy of elitism and even slavery. It is believed that tipping originates from 17th century Europe, where tavern waiters were slipped extra money to ensure promptitude, or TIP, tip for short. That's not the slavery connection. We're getting there. The history of tipping in the United States started in the late 1800s, right around the time the American Civil War ended, and it's a custom that was brought back from Europe. So here's what happened. Wealthy Americans who were visiting Europe were introduced to tipping and brought it back to the US as a way to show off their elevated status. But in these early days of tipping in the US, almost every worker who earned tips was black and a newly freed slave. Tipping very quickly became a way for employees to hire newly freed slaves while paying them basically nothing, under the justification that they would make tips. After the system was established, there was a huge anti-tipping movement. Ultimately, though, the tipping system persisted, evolving into what we see today. Interestingly, the anti-tipping movement found its way to Europe, where it gained traction and met a lot of success. This is why the practice of tipping in Europe today is much less common than in the US. All this despite Europe being where the practice originated. But the fucked uptitude of tipping does not end in its super racist and demeaning past. The federal minimum wage for tipped workers is $2.13, a number that hasn't changed in nearly 30 years. And that stagnant wage isn't an oversight. It is the result of millions of dollars worth of lobbying from companies that really don't want to pay their employees a livable wage. The argument, of course, is that tipped workers can be paid less than regular minimum wage because they'll make that money up in tips. And theoretically, if a server makes less money, including their tips, than the federal minimum wage, the employer is supposed to supplement the rest of that income. But in many cases, that simply never happens. There is this strange lore about how servers make so much money off of tips, but that idea stems from the outliers, which are servers who work at high-end restaurants with wealthy clientele. In no other profession is an employee's wage so dependent on individual customer satisfaction. If you're a bagger at a grocery store and a customer doesn't like the way you bagged, that customer does not have the power to decrease your wage for the time it took you to bag those groceries. But in tipped professions, the amount of money you make at the end of the day is completely dependent on individual customers deciding what they want to tip you, or if they even want to tip you at all. Guess what gender the majority of people in tipped positions are? Women. And guess where 30% of all sexual harassment complaints come from? Women who work in the restaurant industry. Tipped jobs are ripe for exploitation, and a disheartening amount of servers put up with harassment, both sexual and otherwise, from customers in pursuit of tips. Even if you don't care about any of the previous issues mentioned, a system in which you are expected to pay a portion of someone's salary so that they can afford to live, when in every other circumstance that responsibility lies with the employer, should make you question why that responsibility, whether you choose to contribute or not, falls on you as a customer. An employee's wage should not rest in your hands unless you are their employer. The New York Times' Pete Wells summed up the current state of tipping in the US best, stating, "It is irrational, outdated, ineffective, confusing, prone to abuse, and sometimes discriminatory. The people who take care of us in restaurants deserve a better system, and so do we." Hello, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you made it this far, that's super awesome. Oh, there's an earthquake happening right now. Oh. Okay. That's cool. Neat. They don't want me to make the video. The earth is literally shaking. Ah, that's fun. Okay. I should call my mom. These really freak her out.